Welcome to our Game Theory and Money podcast for Week 13. We experienced a bit of a mini bye, much like the teams that played on Thanksgiving Day are experiencing as they head towards Sunday and Week 13. Sure, it's a short week, but hey, you get a little bit of an extra time off. And of course, if you know the podcast, you know why it's different. Because with Cynthia Frelund here and her big brain and all those degrees in predictive analytics and the rest of us who have a bit of an aversion to math, we allow her to help guide us along a numerical journey that helps explain through 10,000 computer simulations why things are going to happen the way they are going to happen. It's good to be back. Cynthia, did you enjoy your mini bye, or was anything different for you over the Thanksgiving holiday?
I actually worked more.
You did? Well, I guess you got 2 big days of football as opposed to just one in a single game on Thursday, so that makes sense.
But I loved it. It was fun.
All right. What was your favorite part of Thanksgiving? Let's just do a little bit of a grab A here before we get going.
Well, Marianne Freeland made a cameo on the Pick'em show, so that was pretty awesome. And also, I love Thanksgiving because I'm a big eater. So any holiday that is focused on eating and football is really something that maximizes 2 of my
It
strengths.
seems like football fans are not unanimous, but overwhelmingly in favor of Thanksgiving being
Big
the greatest
overlap in
holiday
that Venn diagram.
of all. Yes, and we'll get into that and how Thanksgiving played into this week. But before we get into all the games and all the matchups and our matchup of the week and our today, actually, you are in for a treat because we aren't doing the Freeland 4cast, but we are doing a Freeland 5cast because we are so close to the postseason. A lot of these are elimination games of sort this late in the year, so figured we would expand that a little bit and delve a little bit deeper into one more extra game that had serious implications based on who wins and who loses. So let's get it started. We like to roll out playoff odds as this is Week 13, and a lot of things have changed since the last time we talked prior to the Week 12 games. So where do you want to start?
Let's start in the AFC because I know you have a special, connection.
Got a
with
bit
the
of a
AFC.
vested, yeah, it is a vested interest, absolutely.
Pretty vested interest.
Absolutely.
So right now my model has the Patriots, then Steelers, then Jags, then Titans, Chiefs, and Chargers all projected to make the playoffs right now. Notice the Chargers are currently ranked, I believe it's number 9. Our awesome producer John gave me the current seed. It is 9 for the Chargers right now. However, in my model, they are number 6, making it in with the wild card spot.
It's interesting because I actually finally went through and did some tiebreaker research last night and wanted to figure out exactly where, as we get ready for this, for those that don't know, I am the play-by-play person for the Chargers, so got ready for that broadcast against the Browns. A lot of people excited, asking questions about the playoffs. The tiebreaker situation does not favor them all that well against the Ravens. They need the Ravens to lose. If they end up tied with the Ravens in record, I don't think they get in. I think Baltimore ends up getting in just because of Baltimore's record against the conference. The Chargers have not done well against the AFC. So when you go out of conference tiebreaker wild card, it is not record in your division, it's record in your conference. And Baltimore has a pretty handy advantage ahead of them. So I'm guessing you're looking at the Chargers maybe as a division winner here.
I am. Part of that is that the Chiefs are kind of going down.
They're going down quick.
Right,
yeah.
and the Chargers are going up. So if you'll notice, it goes Chiefs 71.3% chance to make the playoffs, Chargers 59, and then Ravens 58.7. So you're totally right. There isn't much of a difference between the Chargers.
0.3%. Yeah, you're right.
Right. So you're totally nailing it there. For me, this could actually be a case where the Chiefs losing really elevates the Chargers' chances and also helps the Ravens. So if you're a Ravens fan, you'd like the Chiefs to lose to the Jets this week.
One of the interesting things about this, and I'm just going back to our first podcast, right, when we talked about what we thought, who we anticipated being the elite teams, who wasn't. I think we had a consensus. I don't want to speak for you. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we were in agreement that the AFC West looked like the best division.
Absolutely.
Like it's going to be, and it's turned out to be one of the worst. And you are now in a position where the Raiders, or I guess it speaks to maybe how good these teams are, that the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Chargers all have the same path. Win out and you will win the division.
Yep.
And all 3 of those teams in Week 13 have that exact same path in front of them. And if you look at the schedule, the Chiefs and the Chargers have a much easier path.
Much easier. That is
than
why
the Raiders.
Raiders fans get very upset with me, and they are ranked, in my model right here, number 9 in terms of who's going to make the playoffs for the AFC. But they get very mad at me, and I'm telling you, their path is more difficult.
They have to go to Philly.
They have to go to Philly. That's one of the key differentiators there. But I want to point out one interesting thing about the Chiefs. It's in their first 5 games, so the first kind of half of when they were dominating, they were scoring points on 54% of their drives. So it's a field goal or a touchdown. And in this case, it was mostly touchdowns because that number was something like 4.7, which means that's more than a field goal average on 54% of their drives. That number is down to 33% of their drives are scoring drives now. And the number's down something like 2.9, which means it's like, it's a field goal. So it'd be a little bit more than 3 if you only look at the scoring drives, but it's mostly field goals now as opposed to scoring touchdowns. Whereas before it was mostly touchdowns, and that's a huge difference maker in this case.
Yeah, and really, like we said, you're talking about one game. And look, who knows what happens? I mean, the Chiefs lost to New York, right? I mean, they say they lost to Buffalo at home. I mean, things that your projections and anybody's observations would say weren't likely to happen. So anything can happen. But when you look at the Raiders, it's really just one game that we're talking about. It's that trip to Philly that is still on their schedule. The most daunting task the Chargers have is a trip to Kansas City, but we see what's happened to the Chiefs as of late. They can't, stop that bleeding. So that's why you feel a little bit better about the Chargers. And in terms of the Chiefs, the back end of their schedule, we've said it all season long. I mean, it is the most friendly of any of those teams. Now, they have to deal with the Jets this week, and that'll be an interesting one to get into. But the only other road trip they have away from Arrowhead is to Denver, a team that is a complete mess right now. So I guess I'm trying to help you out with the Raider fans that come at you because, they can come at you.
I love Raider
they
fans.
Can come at you.
I love Raider fans.
I know it well.
Absolutely, but it's more about what's left as opposed to how, it has nothing to do with how I like a team or not. It's completely everything to do with their schedule. And the funny part is, as good as we thought the AFC West was going to be preseason, we kind of underestimated how competitive and how important the NFC South would be on the other side of this. The NFC South is really the Jenga piece, to borrow from Dave Damashek, is really the Jenga piece for the entire NFC playoff
Before
picture.
You get there, I do want to address just one other thing in the AFC. The AFC South, because I believe we've talked about this off the pod, and I think it's worth sharing on the pod, that your model does not have a lot of belief in the AFC South between the Titans and Jaguars. You do feel like both of their records, and again, just kind of jump in. I don't want to put words in your mouth or to your model, but I get the feeling that you don't feel like those teams are as strong as the other teams that maybe are below them, specifically the Chiefs and the Chargers, or the gap between the Titans, Jaguars, and the Steelers and Patriots. So is it just a schedule thing and the way that the back end of their schedule plays out, why there are such high numbers for them both, not just the Jags or the Titans, one team from that division, but two to get in?
It's exactly that. It's who they're playing. It's also when you look to see, if you look at the division chances for each, it's one of the closer ones that we have here. It's like 60-40 Jags, Titans to win the division. A lot of Titans fans were mad at me that in my playoff model, the Jags are still ahead of them, even though right now the Titans are technically ahead of the Jags in their division, meaning they have a better, because they beat them, meaning they have a better chance.
And they get one at home to end the season.
Right. So in this case, it's both teams, their favorable schedule that's left, and also the fact that in the Jags case, the teams that they have remaining, their defense, the magnitude of how good their defense is outweighs the magnitude of the offenses left. And in the Titans case, the magnitude of their steady offense and their run game specifically, and it's a blended, it's not just Mariota, it's not just DeMarco Murray, but their efficiency in that phase of the game outmatches some of the defenses that they're facing.
So then, just real quick, one last thing before we shift to the NFC. What about the injury to Fournette and what's happened to him really since that Charger game? He had scored a touchdown in every game he had played in. The Chargers show up. They run blitz the heck out of him. Ends up with a high ankle sprain. Now, he had a ton of yards against the Browns, but he did not look like himself, really. And then we saw that
Blake
all come to
Bortles
fruition.
was the leading rusher and had 2 rushing touchdowns, which
against
was
Arizona.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It was
So
fun to watch.
How does that work in your model when you have someone that was such an important part of that offense and was just a perfect match to the defense because he didn't allow Blake Bortles to get you in trouble? How does that play out? What do you do with your simulations for the remainder of the season when you're projecting playoffs and you don't really know what Fournette's going to be with that high ankle sprain the rest of the year?
Well, it looks like he's going to play. That doesn't mean he's going to be 100%. So I kind of factor in a 50% Leonard Fournette in this case. So not quite as efficient in that scrimmage yard leader and that stability stabilizing force like he used to be, but let's say 50%. The other thing that's interesting about the Jags is they have some bad play calling dynamics in my model too. They make risky moves late in the game. You saw it last week when they called pass on second down, which ended up being the reason that they didn't go into overtime. Now, an improbably long season-defining kick from Phil Dawson on the Arizona Cardinals, or not just season, actually career-long 57-yard field goal to win the game. That's also improbable. But if you look at that last drive that they had they run the ball on second down as opposed to try to pass the ball on second down, it only used up 4 seconds of clock. It would have driven them to overtime. So they have, and that's not the first time, they have some weird, improbable calls towards end of game that make difference.
I think anytime you ask Blake Bortles to do something, it's a weird, improbable call in a late game situation. And that's just, obviously it would be recency bias. It's just a bias because of the game I watched. I mean, the fact they should not have beat the Chargers because they put the ball.
No, that's right. That's what I'm saying. Like that play call, like you.
2 interceptions in the final 4 minutes when a team has a lead on you typically means you're going to lose the game. Now, the Chargers were in a tete-a-tete over who can make worse play calls in the final 4 minutes of a game, and it ended up biting them. But it seems like anytime they ask Blake to do too much, and I don't know if that's play calling or if that's just Blake Bortles, right? I mean, what are you going to do? It's like the guy's the quarterback, and it seems like anytime you ask him to do something special in a tight spot where the game is in the balance, it ends badly.
But even when you're not asking him to do something special, like
just manage it. Don't mess this up.
And that's where things get really dicey, is because you're not it's not like you're asking him to convert a 3rd and 15. You're asking him to literally hand the ball off so that not 4 seconds, but there were 17 seconds left, maybe 12 seconds elapses between plays. And that's where you're kind of calling things that don't put him in the best situation. So between the Fournette and between the interesting late game play call, that's going to be really interesting to see going forward if they can keep winning games despite kind of some risky calls late.
All right. We are your AFC South podcast of record with that conversation right there. Now, so again, just to recap, Pats, Steelers, obviously 99.9%.
Those guys
they are
in.
well ahead. Yep. Jags at 91, Titans at 72, with the Chiefs at 72, Chargers 59, just 0.3 of a percentage point ahead of the Ravens for that 6th and final spot. Now we go to the NFC.
NFC. Everything comes down to the NFC South. So every other division. So we tape this on Thursday morning. Right now, every other division has 7 or 8 division game played. After Thursday Night Football tonight, the North, East, and West will all have 8 division games played, while the South will only have 5 left. So the Saints still have to face the Falcons twice, and there's just so many teams. They haven't been able to beat each other up yet. Is basically why.
And they're going to.
And that's why in the standings right now, it's like, you have 3 teams technically in with the Falcons in that 6th place spot. So it's the Saints winning the division, the Panthers in the 5th place spot, and the Falcons in the 6th place spot, currently according to the current standings, as if the playoffs were to start today. However, you have to look forward, and that's why.
Saints, Falcons twice.
Yep.
Saints, Panthers this week. We'll get to that in a minute.
Right. So it goes in my model right now, Eagles. And these Eagles fans are crazy because I told them that they have 100% chance of making the playoffs. And people are like, it's not clinched yet. How can it be 100%?
It's 100%.
Because they're going to win their division because you have to project forward. The chances of them doing
based on their schedule, they will win another game. And when they do,
right,
and the Redskins and the Cowboys play this week, they will clinch the division.
Right. So
it's
You're
like done.
It's technically like 99.999, like very long train of 9s after that. So it's 100.
Shame on you for being a math person and rounding up. All right.
It's not even rounding
Only
up.
us lay people are supposed to round. You're supposed to stick to the numbers. So the Eagles, you mentioned the Vikings well ahead of the rest of the NFC North. And you mentioned the South is going to get sorted out here in the next 2 to 3 weeks because they're all going to do battle with one another. So go ahead. I jumped in. Let's finish it out.
So NFC West is an interesting situation because the Rams, they have a 90.5, so 91, I'm rounding again, made this math people, 91% chance of making the playoffs in my model here. And also the Seahawks, although the Seahawks have gone down, right now they're in my 6th place slot with about 47.4% chance of making the playoffs. They're almost dead even with the Falcons, who are just out.
I think the more important number there, though, Cynthia, not to jump in, but look at the difference in your model between the Rams winning the division and the Seahawks, because that's a much larger gap than just making the playoffs. So when you hear, I think maybe, there's a 33% or 43% difference in making the playoffs between the two. Well, it's nearly a 50% difference in winning the division.
Right, 74 versus 26.
So you basically have this projected. I would say that's a gap that's healthy enough where it looks like the Rams are winning that division.
And in part because when you see the Seahawks, they just, in my model, their defense. So you have Cliff Averill on IR. You have Richard Sherman on IR. Cam Chancellor on IR. And those 3 pieces in conjunction with a run game that has not yet stabilized. We don't. How do you even project the run game? I mean, all I can do is project uncertainty.
People in Seattle right now are going, run game?
Right.
What is that?
Well,
not familiar
no,
with
actually,
this
what
run
they're doing
game
is
you
they're saying
speak of.
there's this guy. His name's Russell Wilson. He's our entire run game, and he's also our entire pass game. So if it weren't for Russell Wilson's big playmaking ability, I mean, literally, it's what's keeping them in this entire scenario is the play of Russell Wilson. And honestly, look, Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, there's a lot of pieces on their defense, Michael Bennett, that are also very good, but it's like 3 pieces on a defense that we're used to having 11 pieces.
If they make the playoffs, I think you would be hard-pressed to give the MVP to anybody besides Russell Wilson.
I mean,
they have to make the postseason, even if they don't win the division, just to make the playoffs.
I think it's the MVP Bowl this week between the Eagles and the Seahawks.
And the Seahawks, yeah.
It's the MVP Bowl. Is it going to be Carson Wentz or is it going to be...
The Seahawks win and they can get into the playoffs. Then
right.
Maybe Russell's, you're right. And if the Eagles continue on this stretch, it's very hard to envision a team with the best record in the league, led by that quarterback, not getting that award. All right, so we have the Rams locked into that division. We already talked about the Saints and the Panthers and how they're going to duke it out this week. We'll get to that matchup in a moment. But I'm going to force you. I know you tried to move on. I saw you flip that page of our rundown that our executive producer, old JG, gave us. But
JG with the amazing November stash still going on.
There is only a 0.9 percentage point difference between the number 6 wild card team Seahawks and the Detroit Lions. And when I look at that Lions schedule, because we are not going to get too deep into this Lions contest this week, or maybe we are, but in case we don't, I would just like you to address that you are talking about 0.9 percentage points between the Lions being in and out. When I look at that schedule, I see a tough one against Baltimore this week, but then they have Tampa, Chicago, Cincinnati, and Green Bay, all games that I would say favor the Lions based on what we know about any of those 4 teams left.
I agree with you that the Ravens are going to be a tough one, and we'll talk about that matchup in a little bit. And my model also agrees with you about the strength of schedule remaining, because you're right.
Yet
the 9%
you chose to just blow right by it.
Of course I blew right by it, because as a disgruntled Lions fan, I just know what's going to happen. An improbable Chicago and Green Bay victory is going to happen. Yeah. And that's just going to make me feel terrible about myself. So but in all reality, the model does point out the strength of schedule remaining for the Lions. By the way, Lions don't have to face, other than the Bucs, they don't have to face, they're done with the NFC South, which is good, because those are the tricky teams that everyone's going to have to get past still, that's a benefit for them. But in this case, the Ravens, if they manage to win this game against the Ravens, that has dual playoff implications. Like, it really helps the Chargers, and it helps everyone in the AFC. That is a big one.
That's the big one.
But if the Lions manage to win it, so if the Lions end up winning, it's going to help the Chargers. It'll help the Lions themselves. If the Lions end up losing, they still can get in. So it's like,
well, yeah, they could lose it still. Anyway, we'll get to it in a minute, because that is going to be one of our Freeland 5 casts. In the meantime, we need to get to our matchup of the week. Well, it was certainly the centerpiece of our NFC playoff picture, the NFC South, and the fact that the Saints and Falcons are going to play each other twice. The Panthers and Falcons are going to play each other once. And this week, we focus on the matchup of the week. That is the Panthers and the Saints in the Big Easy, Superdome, where the Saints are darn good. A lot of people cite that as the toughest place to play in all of the NFL. Who do you have winning, and what is the score?
This one surprised me, because I have the Saints winning by a bigger margin than I would have expected. I have them winning 27-21. I guess I would have thought it would have been, I don't know, when I closed my eyes, I would have thought it would have been a little closer, given how good this Carolina Panthers defense is. But 27-21 is where the model netted out.
It's important to mention, because I see a lot of this in my Twitter timeline, and there are questions that are directed at you, which is why I don't respond to them. I let you do it. But people point out, what a stupid score to project, 24-23 or 25-20. When do scores ever? Your model is just, it's not trying to give you the exact score. It's telling you if it's going to be a tight game or a blowout. So when you see something that's a 6-point difference, as someone who's now done this for 13 weeks with you, that's a blowout. Yeah. Like, that's a big number in favor of the Saints.
That's a big number in favor of the Saints. Also, when people ask me about, I just want to, let's be clear on this. When you think about when you think about the projections that the model will spit out, it's averages. So when a game script starts to go in a crazy direction, you'll see a bigger score differential, right? So like if a team is up by 10 points in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, the team that's down will start throwing the ball more. Throwing the ball more means more turnover. So the point is it going to be a tight game? Is it going to be a not so tight game? And is it going to be a offense heavy game, or is it going to be a defense heavy game? So this one says offense heavy, because there's a lot of points scored overall, and a New Orleans victory.
How much of that, how much of your model factors the New Orleans blowout against the Saints in Carolina? Is that does that single game, because they won by like 3 or 4 touchdowns. I mean, it was a blowout.
Mm-hmm.
I think they won by 3 touchdowns. Does that factor into the model, like previous meeting from earlier in the year?
Well, it's true that in divisional rivalries where we have enough of a sample set where you can go back and forth and see similar configurations of matchups, that does weigh more heavily on the model than than, let's say, when the Saints play the Lions, who they don't face every year. The difference of who's playing in this game does kind of outweigh that. So I don't like batter versus pitcher stats unless they're big enough. And in this case, sometimes they're big enough, but
because it's a division opponent.
Because it's a division opponent, but it's still like the last 4 weeks are more heavily weighted just in general in terms of tendencies and personnel on the field.
As opposed to a head-to-head from earlier in the season.
Having
that's interesting.
Unless the head, like in the NFC East, there's a lot of, or not NFC, AFC East, there's a lot of teams that play each other like 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 week on, like the Bills and the Patriots and the Dolphins and the Patriots. That would weigh in more heavily because they play each other like 2 weeks apart. But in this case, because there's such a space in between, it's more about personnel than anything else.
Yeah, because you think about the Panthers season, and that really was the only blowout. I mean, they were obviously humiliated in Chicago. That was a mess, but their offense got nothing going, and I think Chicago only scored. It's not like it was a high-scoring game.
Nope.
But that was really the only game where they really
Panthers
got
couldn't
blown
score.
out.
Remember they had a game with only
crazy.
field goals against the Bills.
Yeah.
It was a completely different kind of configuration.
All right, so what else? What else goes into that score?
So both quarterbacks in this one are kind of where you start. So Drew Brees and his league-leading completion percentage. Let's see how that happens. Well, one, he's number 2 versus the blitz, and Carolina blitz is second most often. So you're not going to see much of an erosion in Drew Brees' characteristics, like how he distributes the ball and what he does against the blitz, because we haven't seen it all season long. The last meeting, Luke Kuechly was a key differentiator, but I'm going to tell you, Luke Kuechly is a key differentiator in every meeting that he's playing in. He did have an interception in that last one, and he's great against the run. Like, Luke Kuechly is a difference maker in this one. So I went ahead and I looked to see, like, okay, how does this map against Alvin Kamara, who obviously an electric rookie. We have to factor him in kind of every single time he plays now. And Kamara averages 5 forced missed tackles a game, so he's making other people miss at a very high rate. That's number 3 in the NFL over the past 4 games. I'm just trying to say in that 4-game sample set because things have changed since the beginning of the season. He also has, and this is the one thing that is really interesting, he has 37.7% rushing first downs. That's number 2 in the NFL. So every time he's getting the ball, he's giving them an opportunity to advance, to move the sticks, to advance the down. So going into first downs are really key here. And that's why part of why you're seeing the Saints have the most 4+ yards gained on first down. So success on first down, most average yards gained on first down, and then they also convert second down. So that ability on first and second down, especially with Kamara, and then of course with Mark Ingram too, is a real key difference maker. Even though Luke Kuechly's amazing, he's top 10 versus opposing rushers. He's really great in coverage too. They just have the 1-2 punch is going to be kind of something that is advantage Saints.
Right, and that is just such a difference and a departure of what we are used to. And I just still get the feeling that, like, that Drew Brees game, and I guess we saw it in the remarkable comeback against the Redskins, that it's still there, and there are still good enough pass-catching weapons there for him to pull that out if he needs to. But it's almost, and I hate to keep, kind of taking everything back to the Chargers, but I think it's very reminiscent of what Phillip Rivers has gone through this year, which is coaching staff saying, hey, let's try something different, and him saying, okay, let's try it. And then when it's not working, he's still there to say, okay, I can still do what I was doing, but you asked me not to do. And that's kind of what's led this resurgence for the Chargers. And I got the sense that just seeing that little glimpse from Brees against the Redskins was a reminder, oh yeah, that's still there if they need it. And I would not be the least bit surprised if they have to go back to it, and he comes through with it.
Fantasy note here, Michael Thomas, fully playable. And this one kind of, to bite off of what you just said, Michael Thomas fully playable. Last game, he had over 150 passer rating when targeted. That's good.
He's good.
That's pretty good. And so my projection, just a little fantasy note here, over 80 total receiving yards and the touchdown this week, if anyone was thinking about playing him in their fantasy to get into their fantasy playoffs.
I would also point out
And you're playing Kamara and you're playing Ingram and you're playing Breeze. Like, come on.
Just the one difference, I think, between this game and the game earlier in the season is just the fact that, speaking to what the Saints could do with Breeze and let him throw it around if they decided to part from this 1-2 punch at running back, the last about 4 or 5 games, we've seen Ron Rivera and the Panthers say, all right, Cam, go do it.
Go be you.
We need you to be you. And that's been a shift. And we're seeing him leading the team in rushing, I think, 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah, but I did a little digging here, and Cam's rushing hasn't been netting in first downs the past 2 games. So you're right. They have let him, you be you, Cam. Right. You do what you want to do. It's like rushing out of the zone read. That's what Cam Newton does better than anyone else. But teams have picked up on it. So while that worked 3 and 4 games ago, in the past 2 games, only 11% of his rushes have netted in first downs. Should be around 40%.
Right.
So people are picking up on this. And I think the Saints defense, now we got to be careful who's playing. Alex Okafor is out for the Saints defense. So that means a bump up for Cam Newton and potentially, because you have Cam Jordan, who's going to bring you a lot of pressure, but you're missing Alex Okafor on that other side of the defensive line. But I do think they're going to figure out a way to kind of minimize the impact of Cam's rushing. I think that's something that the Saints can lock down a little bit.
I look at, I'll go, I'm with you on this. I like the Saints. It was apparent they should not have won that game last week against the Jets. And the Jets have been in a lot of those games where they walk out with a loss and you say, man, the Jets should have won that game. And just things broke their way, and the defense picked them up, and it wasn't a Cam game, but the Panthers still won. You can't get away with that against the Saints. You'll find yourself behind by 2 touchdowns in a half second.
And you saw Cam not throw the deep ball. So the Saints actually have given up the 5th most 20-plus receptions this season overall. And you need Cam. Last game, you didn't really see Cam take a lot of those deep passes. I mean, he did have 12 targets to Devin Funchess, but they weren't on those really home run balls. Where the Saints, especially if Marshawn Lattimore or Ken Crawley aren't playing or banged up, we got to keep that injury report in mind. Devin Funchess is good. He has a touchdown in my model, in another little fantasy point there. But the Saints, you have to force that deep ball if you're going to want to get those chunk yards against them. And I don't know if Cam hasn't been doing that lately. So for me, advantage Saints.
From our matchup of the week to our very special post-Thanksgiving holiday edition 5-cast. We normally do the 4-cast, but we have 5 games we feel deserve a little bit more attention. So let's get to them. We'll start with the Vikings and the Falcons. Winner and score.
I have Minnesota coming out on top 25-24. So a high-scoring game, even though the Minnesota defense is excellent, but Minnesota has the advantage for me.
Okay, and what is the main factor that goes into that?
Well, they kind of have an interesting matchup because if you look at Atlanta, their third down offense this season ranks number 3, and Minnesota actually has the number 3 third down defense, which is a funny matchup. Atlanta, number 3 in big plays since week 10. Minnesota, number 1 in big plays allowed this season. So these are the types of things where you're like, okay, that's an advantage Atlanta in the second one, advantage defense in the first one. And then Atlanta, number 2 in yards per play this season. Minnesota,
hilarious.
Number 2 in yards per play allowed this season.
There are so many categories where it's within 2 or 3, and we're talking about top 5 rankings, top 10 at worst, in thirds, yards per play, reds. I mean, it truly is the old unstoppable force and immovable object showdown of the week.
So then you start to kind of dig into the things that, like hidden yards and special team. I hate that term, but whatever. So Atlanta does have the worst starting field position of any team this season, and they played a very slow pace. These are things that would favor Minnesota, especially if you go back and watch, if you've got, I love when people talk about the all 22s, right? If you go back and watch, play action has been really good for Minnesota, and it's been something where the Falcons have been vulnerable. So in my model, those kind of things, especially when you look at these smaller kind of minute details, and they're not minute, but those smaller details
Small enough.
In terms of that that's where you're going to see like some big differences. And that's why I have Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen both scoring a touchdown this week, and also have Julio Jones with a touchdown. And, you saw the vertical yards have been the difference maker for Matt Ryan in this offense. So when you get Julio Jones involved, we've all seen that.
Yeah, and we saw it last week where we thought Xavier Rhodes, I mean, anytime just in terms of fantasy conversation, you don't want to play him against Xavier Rhodes. I mean, Marvin Jones wrecked him.
Right.
I mean, Marvin Jones was a wrecking machine last week. And as good as Marvin is, it's not Julio Jones. And you almost wonder if they finally figured out a way. And I would love to say that with certainty, but every single year, Julio has one of those games, and he only has one,
Right.
is usually what it is. So the fact
We've
that last
had it
week,
off. Yep.
yes, he had that 250-yard touchdown game, I'll be interested to see if he can do it again.
So Devontae Freeman is likely back. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like all signs are pointing toward him clearing the concussion protocol. So if you have Tevin Coleman, make sure you're factoring that in. Although the one thing I want to point out is
Coleman's been great.
Oh, he's been great, but if they're going to share
That's what I'm
the
saying.
reps.
I don't know what you do
Right.
and how you, because Freeman's been okay this
Right.
year. He has not been the Freeman from last year that helped get this team to the Super Bowl.
I think if you look at how Minnesota, what happens on first down, so success on first downs, 4+ yards gained on first down, Minnesota ranks 22 in that. That's not where their specialty is. So in my model, it's likely that Freeman will be kind of early down, get me a few yards, and then put, Tevin Coleman in maybe third down, kind of like more passing down. That's potentially what could happen. But point is if you're relying on either one of them to get you to your fantasy, playoffs, then maybe you want to kind of factor that into how many points you think they're going to get. But the one thing that is advantage Minnesota, their defense has been maintained. It's not just one game adding a fluky amount to their stats. Number 2 best red zone touchdown percentage. So that is something where red zone is the area where we could see, historically Matt Ryan, that's where those picks come from. We've seen that happen in the past. I'm not saying it's happening right now. He's been playing really well, but that red zone defense is the difference maker in this game and the reason why I have Minnesota winning.
I have picked against the Vikings far too often. I'm waiting for this house of cards to come crashing down, and I now have to. I picked the Rams to beat them. I picked the Lions to beat them. Now I need to come to the realization that, yes, Case Keenum is a much better than we thought quarterback.
Play action. They got him going.
Exactly. He fits into this system. He's got great receivers. Adam Thielen is underrated. Stephon Diggs, we know, is emerging as an elite receiver in this league. And I like that they shifted to Latavius Murray. And instead of kind of getting that
the 1-2 punch is great.
Yes, it's much better for him. Like you said, there's more play action. Get that guy that can blow through the tackles and try to churn some clock, and then play action for the big play downfield to Thielen or Diggs. So I'm with you. I'll go Vikings. Plus the Falcons, they've been good and they're right back in this.
Their defense is what
and we know that Seattle is flawed. We know that Dallas is flawed. They beat up on Tampa. So before I start getting into that Atlanta, maybe they just needed to gel a little bit, new coordinator, settle in, and now this is a team that went to the Super Bowl and should have won it last year. I'm going to go ahead and take the Vikings with you.
Which means the Falcons are going to win.
Probably. All right, to the Eagles and the Seahawks, our Sunday night football prime time matchup. You mentioned the MVP Bowl.
The
Seahawks
MVP Bowl.
win. Maybe
I
they
think
get into
it
the
is the
playoffs.
MVP
So,
Bowl.
there you go. So winner score.
The winner is the Philadelphia Eagles by a score of 28-22. High-scoring game, despite Philadelphia's defense being excellent. And of course, we always think of Legion of Boom, even Legion of Boom as being excellent, even if pieces are missing. So a lot more offense than I would have closed my eyes and imagined to begin with. I love looking at Carson Wentz's stats and Russell Wilson's stats. Both of them are like really fascinating. The cool part about Wentz is red zone touchdown percentage is first among quarterbacks who played at least 7 games. So he has like an Aaron Rodgers like red zone touchdown percentage, 77%. That's insane. Aaron Rodgers, in the beginning of the season, he only played 6 games. It's like 78%. It's 1 percentage point off of that. And the reason is balance. So Wentz can do it through the air. 28 touchdown passes leads the league. 12.5 yards per completion. That's number 3. And then rushing first downs. Carson Wentz with his own legs. He's got all those running backs, but with his own legs has 21 rushing first down, also number 3 amongst quarterbacks. That's actually, I thought that was a little bit sneaky because I think about Ajay, Clement, I think about, obviously LeGarrette Blount, right? Like all the different rushers. Oh, he can do it too. So
that is the Andrew Luck comparison.
Yep,
when you saw Wentz emerge, you're like, he might be a little more Andrew Luck than Big Ben. Just because he's a little bit more athletic. Yeah, he's big, sturdy, has a huge arm, can take a hit in the pocket. But when he takes off, he's got some get up and go. And that's more reminiscent, I think, of Andrew. Not that Ben couldn't do it early in his career.
I think people just were talking about the small school comparison. I think they just couldn't get over the Miami of Ohio and North Dakota State. I think they got a little stuck on that one. But I agree with you with the Andrew Luck comparison. The thing in this one that's really interesting are quick strike points. So the Philadelphia Eagles have scored 59 points on plays of 4 or less in a drive. So 59 points leads the league. The league average is 28. This without Richard Sherman, without Cam Chancellor, without these people, that is the difference maker in this one. And that's why I have Philadelphia coming out on top. But I do want to point out in this one, LeGarrette Blount gets the touchdown,
Okay.
Alshon Jeffrey, and of course, Zach Ertz. And on the other side, Carson Wentz has almost 300 total yards, 30 of them rushing. Both quarterbacks in this one actually project to be good picks. So Carson Wentz almost 300, and the same thing, Russell Wilson has over 300. They're my number 2. Wilson's my number 2, and Carson Wentz is my number 3 quarterback ranking of the week.
In a world, in a fantasy world, it is very reminiscent of, in a fantasy world, it is very reminiscent of the Patriots when it comes to their backs. You just don't know.
Nope.
But you want to play each of them, LeGarrette Blount or Jay Ajayi, or even, to some degree, Clement or Smallwood. Who knows what they're going to do, but one of them's going to get that touchdown. And like you said last week, and I guess Ajayi's speed is a bit of a concern. We've seen him get swallowed up from behind after breaking big runs.
Right.
Fumbled last week. That's how Alshon Jeffrey got the touchdown. But yes, I think against the Seahawks, it's a run right at him, LeGarrette Blount type of defense. And I'm with you. The Eagles look like they are so far ahead of the rest of the NFC that this is kind of their coronation in prime time.
And just on the other side of the ball, Jimmy Graham and Doug Baldwin are the 2 touchdowns for me.
Yeah, Russell and Jimmy have that play, that red zone play from the fact that it's not stoppable. Like it is unstoppable. We see it every single week that there is going to be a Russell Wilson to a Jimmy Graham touchdown play because they cannot stop it. And good for you fantasy owners that put your faith in Jimmy Graham because it is now being rewarded. Again, I'm with you. I'll take the Eagles. Let's shift to the Lions. Oh, here we are. The Lions and Ravens. Oh, Cynthia, from the center of your hand when you hold it up to mimic the state of Michigan and your
Michigan's finest.
Yes, your dark past with the Lions and all the heartbreak they have served you. What do we do here?
Really,
Who wins?
it's been
What's
really
the score?
heartbreaking.
I know.
So I have Baltimore coming out on top, 22-21. This game's in Baltimore, so I think that's a closer score than you might have imagined, given that Ravens kind of the home field. You'd think that gives them more of an
Builds
advantage.
in an advantage, sure.
Right. So Matthew Stafford's had over 300, so 316.4 passing yards per game since Week 8, which leads the league. But has Baltimore had a 300-yard passer yet? No.
They have not.
They've not allowed one. There's 4 teams that haven't, and they are one of them.
All right, so let me go through their schedule.
Okay.
Marcus Mariota, Brett Hundley, Tom Savage.
Nope.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yep.
Obviously against Miami, they shut them out. Was that the Matt Moore game or was that a Cutler game? Either way, whatever. Minnesota again, Chicago, Mitch Trubisky. You see what I'm getting at here.
I do.
Can be a misleading stat because they have not really played. They got Jacksonville, Bortles, Cleveland, Cincinnati. It hasn't really lined up for them to have that 300-yard passer save the one game against Pitt and Big Ben.
Yeah, but see, here's my problem with that. When I look at who the pass rushers are, and you need a few seconds in order to be able to let a deep play kind of emerge because you want to be able to throw the ball long. And if you look at, Suggs versus, I guess, Taylor Decker, the left tackle, that matchup is in favor of Suggs in my model. However, so this one could be like a lot of sacks in this game because on the other side, Ziggy Ansah, he outmatches Ronnie Stanley. So to me, this is like the sack bowl maybe.
I'm gonna. This is where I'll break from you. I'm taking the Lions just because I watched what they did to that Minnesota defense. They were able to put up points on Minnesota. I know they can't run the ball and it's not balanced.
But see, here's my problem. It's like Jimmy Smith or Ladarius Webb, right? So Marvin Jones probably gets to Jimmy Smith and Golden Tate.
So look what he did to look what DeAndre Hopkins did to Jimmy Smith. I mean, his Pro Bowl
DeAndre
berth took a
Hopkins.
big hit. Not saying that Marvin Jones is DeAndre Hopkins,
No,
but he
he's
did
not.
have a great game against Xavier Rhodes, who had shut down most other number 1 receivers. And I don't put it so much on Jones. I think it's the connection. I just have that much faith in Matt Stafford to be able to make
great.
those plays.
Matt Stafford, I'm one of those people who thinks he's there's overrated and underrated. I think for his price, and he does lead right now, he's rated, whatever that means, right? But so for me, the more likely touchdown is against Ladarius Webb and Golden Tate. This is just from the types of routes run and success against these types of routes. And Marvin Jones has more total yards in my projection, but Golden Tate has the higher touchdown, objective in this one. And then Mike Wallace on the other side, he gets Darius Slay. And big play Slay has been very good this season. He's been an excellent, the slot coverage is great. So to me, Mike Wallace, probably not the same fantasy game. And then Alex Collins, that one is where the touchdown comes in. And it's the Woodhead, that's the problem, is the Alex Collins and the Danny Woodhead kind of
Collins has been
potential
great.
upside.
Talk about a find. I mean, being able to, and not to mention, of course, from what team? Seattle, who desperately needs a runner, and he ends up getting signed off their practice squad. And he has been just a godsend for the Ravens.
Yep. And just a note here, if you have Amir Abdullah in your fantasy, you might want to be careful because his neck, he's still been on the injury report with a neck injury. So that's kind of like a real injury. Let's not
they're going to have to throw it around. No doubt. The Lions are going to have to throw it around.
Right.
All right. So we break there. I take the Lions. You take the Ravens. I have a feeling we'll be back in cahoots on the Patriots-Bills winner score.
I have New England coming out on top 29-20.
Yeah.
I think this one, the Tom Brady to Cooks has an over 125 passer rating over the past 2 games. That's pretty
Took him a minute.
good.
Took them a minute to get settled in, but now, man, are they. And this is what we said at the start of the season, right? Tom Brady has not had a receiver with this type of speed or this type of skills since Randy Moss. And now you're starting to see what he's able to do with someone this talented.
So he does match up against E.J. Gaines from a perspective like which side of the field E.J. Gaines defends. However, I have him catching 5 of 6 targets for 88 yards and a touchdown. So advantage Cooks in this one if you're looking for fantasy points. On the other side, LaShawn McCoy, shady. He has the 5th most 12-plus rushes in the league, and he gets Kyle Van Noy on defense. So that's one area where if you have LaShawn McCoy, fully playable, I think this is going to be a good matchup for LaShawn McCoy. He does have 31% of the team's scrimmage yards, so I wouldn't think you'd be sitting him necessarily. But, you might think, the defense on the Patriots is getting better. But for me, the matchup, LaShawn McCoy, fully playable here. So
yeah, the interesting thing just from the matchup standpoint is Burkhead still going to kind of be – is it now Burkhead and Deion Lewis?
Do we ever know? Deion Lewis is super efficient.
Yeah, so that's
super efficient.
James White has kind of been squeezed out a little bit here.
So
Gillislee is now inactive.
Right. Don't play James White.
It looks like that's kind of their 1-2, and man, does it look like a potent 1-2 in the running game. And when you look at their past couple losses to what I think you can say based on what we've now seen from the Chargers the last few games, good offenses, balanced offenses. The Bills have not been able to keep up.
Nope.
And when you're talking about arguably the best offense
if you need
right
a flyer, though, you could look. I mean, Calvin Benjamin is hurt, probably not going to play. Stay away from him. But if you're looking for a flyer in terms of passing, because I do have the Bills playing from behind in the second half, so maybe the Charles Clay, if you need a tight end and you're looking for one there, that connection has been very fruitful for you, not for you, but for any fantasy player that has.
Charles Clay.
I don't have Charles. I think I do in one league, anyways. But Charles Clay could be one where you're targeting that game script of passing in the second half.
Okay, I'm with you on the Pats. Let's get our 5th and final one here in the 5-cast. Steelers, Bengals.
Oh, another fan base that is mad at me is the Bengals about playoff odds. We'll get to that
Really?
in a second. So they think they should be in it. So anyways, Pittsburgh coming out on top.
Tough schedule, if I remember right.
know.
I mean, their schedule's nasty.
Right. So I have the Steelers coming out on top 25-20. And we did see those Pittsburgh corners looking a little vulnerable this last game against the Green Bay Packers. However, in this one, it's not going to be as big of a difference because if you look at the O-line for what's going to happen with the Steelers up front and the O-line for the Bengals, it just seems to me like I don't see a way where Andy Dalton, who has been better under pressure than I thought. I really did some digging to see what's going on. I don't think he's going to be able to have time to get it to A.J. Green kind of as much as Bengals fans might like to see.
Just quickly to get the
Yep.
Bengals fans off your back.
Ugh.
Steelers,
Yep.
Vikings,
Yep.
at Minnesota, by the way.
I'm telling you.
Lions,
Yep.
at Baltimore.
Yep.
You're being shortchanged.
They get mad. They told me I'm being unfair about the chances for the Bengals to make the playoffs.
Yeah, they're in the 8th spot right now. They have to jump 3 teams to get into the playoffs with the Steelers, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Ravens left on their schedule.
I don't know what they think. Anyways, some 2 bright spots if you are a Bengals fan. Joe Mixon, he does get Ryan Shazier. Ryan Shazier has been very good. However,
he is so damn fast.
He's really fast, but sometimes that fastness, that's a word,
over-aggressive,
can bite him because he'll miss a tackle. So Joe Mixon, fully playable in fantasy. You saw him get the most volume and touches.
Makes sense. He's a Steeler. That was always the concern with Polamalu, right?
Yep.
Is for all those big splash plays, sometimes over-pursue. Seemed to work out for him, though. Likely first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right. Seems like it's going to be a good one.
Be all right for Shazier.
And I do think Geno Atkins still has like a chance. Like, look, the O-line for the Steelers is number 3 in minimizing pressures over the whole season. But Geno Atkins has been excellent too. So I'm giving some love where love is due. But I still have Antonio Brown. I don't think there's any corner that can match up with him, even if you're the very best corner, right? So and I don't think they have the best corners for the Bengals. So Antonio Brown, fully playable. Lev Bell, he probably gets a little bit of Burfict, but I don't think Bell doesn't seem to get rattled by Burfict shenanigans. So Le'Veon Bell's ability to make other people miss tackles is incredible. Advantage Steelers all around.
You're going to love this because I know when it comes to a causation correlation conversation, pardon the alliteration there.
I like that.
And the rhyming. But it is so hard, and it pains me to say it. It is so hard to ignore the home road splits for Ben Roethlisberger. It is just, it's nuts. Like, it is nuts that he can go to a place like Indianapolis and play as bad as he did. I mean, every single year you look at the home road splits, and there is nothing even close when it comes to elite quarterbacks in how much better they are at home than away from home. And I don't know why it happens, but it does. So there's your little nugget for the Bengals.
I would like to ask him about his prep. Because I'm curious. I'm very curious about.
It makes no sense.
Right. It's an interesting. Because I see what you're saying. But the one thing that you know what another adage that I hate is defense travels. I hate that. But Steelers defense, they have the top pressure rate, one of the top 3 pressure rates. They convert their pressures to sacks at a top 5 rate, and they've allowed no touchdowns under pressure. So that, to me, is a much bigger factor than Ben Roethlisberger's, or Rathesberger's, if you want to mispronounce it, Ben Roethlisberger's home and road splits.
Yeah, I'm just going through his home and roads, and it's hilarious. All of his home games this year, he has got, save the Jacksonville game, which was the outlier there. Right. His quarterback rating is over 100, and he has, let's see, does he have any? No. He has
He likes to mess with me.
0 quarterback ratings over 100 on the road.
He likes to mess with me.
Crazy.
You know what? He's messing with me.
I take the Steelers as well, and that wraps up our Frelund 5-cast. So we'll go quickly through the rest of this week's matchups because we do have some that are lopsided. If I feel like there is something worth me pointing out, I will, I guess, engage. But otherwise, Cynthia, I send you off to the races. 9 games. Let's do it in 9 minutes or less.
We can
start
do it
with the Chiefs and the Jets in New York.
I have the Chiefs coming out on top 23-21 in a closer game than you might imagine. For a fantasy note here, Tyreek Hill and Robbie Anderson have similar projections, but Anderson has the better touchdown odds.
I'm taking the Jets.
Do it.
I am taking the Jets. I think there is just too much scuttlebutt in Kansas City. This has been hanging over their
Chargers.
head.
Listen, I'm on to you. You're a Chargers. You're like just trolling them.
This most definitely could be construed as me being a Chargers hawk.
Yeah.
But as someone who has a couple players on the Jets in my fantasy squads in my league of record, I have been watching a lot of Jets football this year. Specifically, I picked up Robbie Anderson like 4 weeks ago. That has been the reason why I'm making a late surge in my Orange County Punk Rock League.
Oh,
they are much better than their record suggests.
100%.
That Jets team is pretty darn good. Josh McCown has been freaking great, really, in a lot of these games. And the whole Pat Mahomes thing and all what is wrong with Kareem Hunt? Why can't he run the ball?
Jamal Adams is what's wrong with Kareem Hunt in this game.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So now you have a matchup where all of the conversation is we've got to go back to what we were doing early in the season and push the ball downfield. That's a bad idea with a guy that's roaming the middle of that field like Jamal Adams, not to mention providing the run support he can provide. I mean, he is as good as advertised and then some. And it just seems like the wrong game to try to get back to that, which was working earlier. And I just envision a turnover or two, and then things really get nuts in Kansas City.
Defensive Rookie of the Year, Jamal Adams or Marshawn Lattimore?
Tough, because Marshawn Lattimore missed the last game. He's not 100%, but if he stays healthy, I think you give it to Lattimore because of the record. I'd say probably Jamal Adams has been the better player, but Lattimore has been so good and has really been the big reason why that Saints defense has shifted to the positive. And you saw what happened last week. I mean, when he wasn't in, you got Cooper Kupp and Josh Reynolds going off for the Rams at the receiver position. But they're just, you can feel it when there's a stink on something, and the questions they have to answer, the aggressiveness with which a fan base and a media is starting to ask them. You
don't even care about the Darrelle Revis sighting?
Yes, that's the other thing. When you sign
Darrelle
Darrelle Revis,
Revis,
when that's where you're at in your secondary, the Darrelle
you don't
Revis
like
is
the
now an option.
revenge narrative? Oh, he's going back to the Jets. He's going to go in New York. He's going to just have 8,000 tackles.
Is he going to run, or is he bringing a rascal to scoot around on the field? How is he going to get around? Because we saw what that looked like last year, having Darrelle Revis out there. They moved
You don't
him
think
to
he's got
safety.
one good
it
game
got
in
so bad that they moved him to safety.
You don't think he's got one good, like, I
Fresh
want to
legs,
light
one good-
up these gangrene monsters?
Good luck keeping up with, I guess you're going to take Robbie Anderson or Jermaine. I mean, that's what we're talking about at this point. This
Austin
look, it won't
Safarian
surprise
Jenkins.
me.
I want to see him matched up with Austin Safarian Jenkins.
I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout. I feel like the Jets are a lot better than their 4-7 record suggests they are. They've been in a lot of these games and let them slip away late. That was way too long. I will now relax.
No, we're
and,
good.
let you do
I like
your
that
thing.
one, though.
Broncos, Dolphins.
This one isn't as exciting. I have Broncos coming out on top 21-20. The Dolphins defense has given up 75% of a touchdown in 75% of opposing teams' red zone trips. That's all you need to know.
Okay.
No Damian Williams, no Aqib Talib playing, so maybe a little bit better for
By the way,
passing.
I would just also weigh in Trevor Siemian back.
Yeah.
And he should have never been pulled out. You know, that is clear. It is clear that he should have never been removed from that position in favor of Brock Osweiler or Paxton Lynch.
Yep.
And that, I think, will go a long way. You'll see a much more efficiently operated offense because he was pretty good at throwing that thing around. Their offensive line is a mess, but I think he's better at navigating
You
that
think he's
mess.
better than Paxton Lynch? That you're going out
See what
hot
I mean?
take.
Like,
hot take
exactly.
alert.
Look out. Post that one.
Oh, wait, is he better than Brock Osweiler?
Alert the AP.
Where's the social team? We need to get this on
Right?
some sort
Put
of
that
thing
up on the
now.
wire.
Great.
All right, 49ers Bears. Winner score.
Chicago coming out on top 22-18. Yes, we're having a Jimmy Garoppolo sighting.
Excited about that.
Me too. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited to chart. Do you know who has taken the most passing attempts in the National Football League?
I don't
San Francisco. Do you know who has made the fewest touching pass down? Oh, wow.
This one I know easily.
Touching pass
yes,
downs.
the Bears
receivers?
are averaging
Yeah.
about 11 attempts per game.
Well, so it's who's thrown the fewest touchdown passes was also the 49ers. Hilarious. And then the
interesting.
Bears just don't throw.
They don't throw at all.
So it's like the team that throws a lot but is very inefficient with it against the team that doesn't throw at all. And let's just go Jordan Howard. Hopefully,
Hey,
has
here's an
a great game.
idea, Chicago Bears coaching staff. There's this guy named Tariq Cohen. When you give him the ball, he can make
Heard of
magical
him.
things happen.
Heard of him.
And you're giving him 1 to 2 touches per game because your offense is so dynamic. Oh, it's not like you didn't see it earlier in the year. And it's not like the last time you had a chance at winning a game, he wasn't one of the reasons why, yet he disappeared again this past week. All right, Buccaneers, Packers, winner score.
I have the Packers coming out on top 23-21, even though Jameis Winston will be back. And I think you should play everyone from Mike Evans to Cam Brate to Deshaun Jackson in fantasy. I still have the Packers coming out on top because Brett Hundley can make first downs with his legs. And the Tampa Bay defense is, apart from Gerald McCoy, they have a couple of good players. They have a good linebacker. But I think advantage, even though we've seen Green Bay be kind of crazy, we saw them be pretty good too. And Brett Hundley can run.
I mean, they got the ball out of Hundley's hands quick.
That's right.
They found a hole in that Pittsburgh defense. They exploited it. Selfishly, I am going to inject myself here and say Green Bay wins because I so desperately want Aaron Rodgers to come back and wreck the NFC North again and just continue.
You were a Lions fan earlier in this podcast, and now you're anti-Lions fan.
How do you not want to see that? Isn't it? I mean, it is so great to know that he is just lingering. And remember, I was born and raised in Chicago, so there is a little bit of that left. Actually, there is none of that left in me. Their media department is so good, and they treat people so well that I really do appreciate the Packers. But I just want to see it. It's so entertaining to know that is hanging out there for the NFC North.
Seriously.
Saying, are they really going to stay in it long enough to get Rodgers to come back and win games by 4 touchdowns, go into the playoffs, and not upset someone in the first round?
Lord.
Yes, that's what I want to see. All right, Texans, Titans.
Tennessee comes out on top 25-20, but play DeAndre Hopkins if you have him in fantasy.
Okay. I think the Titans are terrible. I think they have looked terrible as of late.
But you think they're terribler than the Texans?
I mean, I feel like one of those two teams, either the Jags or the Titans, that's got to come crumbling down. It is
How's
a
the cards?
masquerade.
Well, I have both of them winning. Because the Colts and the Jags are the next team you're going to ask me about. And I have Jacksonville coming out 26-16.
Most definitely there. I mean, think about it. The Colts were up in that game until what? The final 5 minutes?
Right.
And then they were reminded they were the Colts. And things just started falling apart for them. And it was a late surge by the Titans to get that victory. So Jags on top of the Colts. That means that stays static in the AFC South. And we'll keep looking at that December 31st, New Year's Eve showdown between those two to decide who wins the division. Browns, Chargers.
I mean, this one's easy for me. Chargers come out on top 29-17. But I have one interesting question that I wanted to ask you about. No first drive points the whole season.
Missed the field goal from 31
Weird.
yards. Isn't that crazy? And my statistician handed me a note right before Nick Novak lined up for that field goal that he wanted me to read that said this will be the first. And I was like, just hold on to that note.
Hold on to that
okay?
note.
And sure enough, Nick Novak hurt himself. And yes, 0 point. Not just no touchdowns, no points.
And then it's going to be, first down's going to be interesting this game because actually the Chargers have the fewest 4+ first down, like 4+ yards earned on first down, and Cleveland has the third fewest. So we're going to see who's going to be.
It's a battle of who can't do anything on first down.
But I think the Chargers come out big on top.
For people that say trap game, I just want to point this out because it was a funny comment that Coach Anthony Lynn, I was with the team on Wednesday, said. He was asked if it was a trap game, and he said, "We're 5-6. Teams that are 5-6 don't have trap games. That's not how it works."
That's really funny.
It's like if we were 9-1, yeah, come at me and ask if it's a trap game. But at 5-6, no, you don't overlook anyone because you realize you need to win each and every game if you're going to have a shot at making the playoffs. Rams Cards.
Rams big, 28-21.
No faith in Blaine Gabbert, huh? No faith in Adrian Peterson.
I mean, it's just no.
The Rams defense statistically
that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, statistically it says that they're not good against the run, that they give up a lot of yards and points.
They're going to stop Adrian Peterson.
That was earlier in the season.
Right.
If you look like your model shows last 4 games, that's why you have this so lopsided by a full 7 points.
Something fun. Rams the second most points on first possession.
There you go.
Just something to know.
All right, finally, Giants Raiders.
Okay, Oakland's coming out 24-14. Out on top. They're not just coming out. They're coming out on top.
Yes.
Yeah.
Geno Smith.
I mean, what do we need to say here?
Nothing. It's all been said.
It's all been said.
It's all been said. All right, let's shift to the confidence index, the 3 predictions you made that you feel most confident in.
Tons of points for both LA teams. So the Rams and the Chargers, both big wins and big offensive games in both of these. And then I really like Minnesota to beat Atlanta in a close one in Atlanta.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. The Case Keenum, just let the guy have the job, huh? He's doing a great job.
Or I think it's mental now. He's like, if I just say every time, like that, if I keep him like kind of.
Keep that carrot out there?
Right.
I guess it really isn't a carrot. It's more of a threat.
Right. Like if he just says I don't know if he's still my starter. Keep going. Maybe it's like some sort of superstitious thing each time, right? Like if I say every week on Tuesday, like we're just going to start you this week, but next week is still up for grabs.
Yes.
Maybe it's maybe it's superstition.
No, I'm saying, as our producer just said, it's a carrot on a stick, but it's not really because it's not a reward. There's no reward there. It's a negative. It's like, hey,
negative,
you might not
right?
be. So it is a negative as opposed to a reward that he is chasing. Just congratulate your front office. Hey, there were a ton of backup quarterbacks signed this offseason. You made the best signing, for $10 million in Jay Cutler.
And
not
$2 million,
good.
Case Keenum.
$16 million, Mike Glennon, not good. $2 million, Case Keenum.
Mike Glennon's multiple years, too.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well done. Jackpot. You win. Just embrace it. You're leading the division. He looks good.
Spin zone.
It's a good fit.
I have a spin zone here. Mike Glennon, Aaron Rodgers, same agent. Maybe it's something like, there's something interesting there. Diabolical.
Or maybe it was just that the
maybe
Bears gave
agent.
him $32 million.
And you signed on the dotted line there, right?
Run.
Yeah.
He crawled to Chicago over broken glass while dragging his tongue to sign that contract. All right, is that it? Is that all the confidence index? All right.
Yep.
We thank you, our listeners, for sharing our podcast on Twitter, on Facebook, with all your friends. It's new. It's our first season. We want to keep it growing. We cannot thank you enough. We love hearing from you in our Twitter timelines or through social media. If you have not yet, make it easy on yourself by subscribing to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, whatever podcast station you use to get your content. Help us continue to grow, if you don't mind, by leaving us a rating and a review on iTunes. And that brings us to our review of the week. This is a 5-star from Dr. I'm going to say Dr. Urko.
Yep.
Or it could be Drerko, or it could be Dre. Okay.
Urko.
With a fresh approach to football and 2 intelligent and awesome hosts. Okay, that's already too positive. Game Theory and Money has turned into a weekly listen for me. Frelund, a delight when she first came on DDFP a few months ago, and it was awesome to hear her rather brilliant insights. Matt Money Smith, a 21st century...
listen, Matt Money Smith, a 21st century Renaissance man, if there is one. And let me tell you, there is one. Is one of the best radio/podcast personalities out there with a fresh approach to football and 2 intelligent, awesome hosts. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. Game 30 and Money has turned into a weekly listen for me. We really appreciate it.
If that's too positive for you, come on, write some
Matt Money
reviews.
Smith is not just one of the best. I'm going to go out and say
it.
He is the best. And he's the best Chargers voice, best of any football or basketball No, it's
It's
true.
going to be really uncomfortable.
Oh,
Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back again next week with another installment of the Game Theory and Much podcast.